Okay, today we're going to talk about preparing Rosemark to connect up with QuickBooks. We'll look at the whole big picture of it, starting with the basic setups that are necessary. We need to set up service types, set up accounts, pay bill codes, and we have to actually install the QuickBooks connection. That's the extra piece of software that allows Rosemark and QuickBooks to connect to each other. Let's first talk about setting up service types. Service types define the basic type of service that you provide for your clients, and it connects in with a bunch of other things related to the automation with QuickBooks. To set them up, go to File, Configuration, Service Types, and here you'll add the ones that make sense for your agency. We can help you figure that out if you're not sure. This is an example set that you're seeing here. It sort of gives a typical sort of set, but any individual agency is going to have their own particular mix. Once you have the account or the service type set up, it's now time to set up the accounts. Now the accounts relate to the accounts in your QuickBooks chart of accounts. And we don't have to set up all of the accounts that are there, just the ones that relate to transactions that will happen either on the billing or the payroll side. Here we can see one setup where services is the account, aides, companions, nurses, those are sub-accounts of those. That's just one way to do it. A very typical way is to use fee for services as the main income account, and for payroll to just use payroll expenses. But it doesn't matter so much what they're called as that they have to match between Rosemark and QuickBooks. Here is on the Rosemark side, you go to File, Configuration, Accounts. That's where you add them in, just the ones that relate to those kinds of transactions. There's also, it's good to have one set up for mileage and miscellaneous expenses if you do any of that. Notice that the here we're showing services, companions. That's indicating how you set up a sub-account relationship. So you have the top level account followed by a colon, no space, and then the sub-account. So if we go back to here, you can see services, companions is the sub-account of that service of services. Same thing here. That's how it's represented. Once you have your accounts set up and your service types, you're ready to set up the pay bill codes. That's what actually connects the pieces together and relates them to what happens in QuickBooks. So you go to File, Configuration, Pay Bill Codes. There you'll find the pay bill codes. To get started, you go to File, Add New Set of Pay Bill Codes, and choose the date that makes sense. That essentially that date just needs to precede any shift that you would want to be billing or paying for as a startup thing. Going forward, you can also use that when you change your rates wholesale. You can go in and put a new effective date for everything and have your rates change at that point. For each pay bill code, notice that there's a billing account and a payroll account, as well as a bill rate and a pay rate. For the most part, the QuickBooks service item and QuickBooks payroll wage items take care of themselves. They just mimic the service type. If you have some particular need, you can put something different in there. For most people, that doesn't really matter. Okay, with the basic setups done, it's time to install the QuickBooks connection. We generally recommend that this be done with QuickBooks open and running on your QuickBooks company file. To get started, go to our website, go to the Downloads page, and you'll find the QuickBooks Connection Installer for QuickBooks Pro. You download that and run it, and it will step you through a fairly short installation process. Once that's done, you go back into Rosemark, go to File, File, QuickBooks Connection, and hit the Connect button there. The first time you do this, that should bring this dialog box up, and there are two items that need to be checked, indicated here with the red circles. Note that occasionally QuickBooks doesn't bother to bring this up to the top, so you might have it open but not seeing it. If you seem to be stuck, try minimizing windows and seeing if you can find this window. But these two items need to be checked to allow QuickBooks Rosemark to access QuickBooks even if it's not running, and also to allow the application to access personal data. Without those checked, the application can't, or the automation can't happen. Okay, so now that we have the basic setups done, we need to set up our individual services so that they are ready with what they need to connect. And that basically involves that on each active client, of course, you have to set up the service properly. You have to set the payment obligation, which indicates who's supposed to pay for it. And we'll look a little bit at the relationship between customers who pay the bill and clients who receive service, and the different combinations that can be present there. So first, let's look at setting up services. You've probably already done some of this because when you first start scheduling, you have to do at least some setups on your service. So on the service, which you can get to from the client's main form, you just double-click on the service or click on the View button over on the right. We need to make sure that the service type is set, and here you can see there's a black circle around the Set button. If you click on that, then that will bring up the list of service types that you've defined. You just select the one that's appropriate for this service, and it'll look like that. With the service type selected, our next thing is to set up the payment obligation. That's how we define who's supposed to pay for the service, and also where we can override bill rates and things like that. So the first thing is to add a payment obligation. If you already have one in here and it just doesn't have a customer or something, just double click on it rather than adding a new one. And here's our new payment obligation. And you'll notice in the middle there's a Set Customer and Same as Client button. And you're going to use the one that's appropriate. Same as Client just means the client pays their own bill. Set Customer means we need to either find or add a new customer who's going to pay the bill for this person. Once we've set that, then you'll see the customer indicated there. So here's an example where the client and the customer are the same person. Customers and clients sometimes confuse people. The basic thing is that the customer pays the bill and the client receives service. Here's an example where the client and the customer are not the same person or entity. And you can see how that relates to that the client receives the service and the customer pays the bill. They have different responsibility and different roles, and they're going to be represented in QuickBooks in different ways. So as I've said, the client and the customer can be the same person, or they can be two different people or entities. Alright, so with the basic setups there, let's take a look at the actual syncing process. So Rosemark can synchronize employees, independent contractors, and customers. So caregivers are either employees or independent contractors, depending on which way your agency works. In general, you don't have both in a single agency. I'd say most agencies have employees, but some agencies use independent contractors. Employees will synchronize with employees over in QuickBooks. Independent contractors will sync with vendors in QuickBooks, because you don't actually run payroll on independent contractors. You're basically paying a vendor by QuickBooks terminology. Customers are also synchronized, and the way that works out is that the customer on Rosemark's side will synchronize with the customer in the Customer Center in QuickBooks. Here's an example that shows a person where the client and the customer are two different people, and you can see how that's represented on the QuickBooks side. First is the customer, the payer of the service, last name, comma, first, and then that's followed by the client, so that you have both of those things there. In a case where the client and the customer are the same, then it'll just be the one, and it'll be pretty obvious from that what's going on. That's the basics of connecting with QuickBooks. This leads the way to payroll and billing automation, but at this point you've basically got them connected, and you should be able to manage most of what you need to manage from Rosemark and have it flow right over to QuickBooks for you to really minimize the amount of data entry and management that you have to do.